Hello, and welcome to Eldritch Extras. I'm Mike Mason, and this is...
I'm Paul Fricker.
How are you doing today?
Well, I'm very good, yes.
I
can just see your shirt says bloody something. I mean, that's enough, really.
Well, that's
could be anything.
Bloody hell can. From the Uncanny BBC podcast. It's a phrase used in the very first episode by the guy who had a ghostly encounter, and the interviewer Danny replies with "bloody hell, Ken," kind of thing. and there you go. Yes.
Well, talking of strange encounters, you've been out to some, haven't you? You've been trying to experience some at a convention recently.
Well, it wasn't, come and meet a ghost convention. It was, which would have been interesting, but no, it was the ASSAP conference, Seriously Strange conference, held in Bath. They do it every year over a couple of days at the university, and have various speakers talking about various paranormal things. I should probably say ASSAP stands for...
I was going to ask.
Yeah, the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. But nobody can ever remember that. It's just called ASSAP. So...
even ASSAP is like, I don't know.
It's akin to like the Society for Psychical Research, and
right,
a little bit like the Ghost Club. They're both obviously quite older institutions, over 100 years. ASSAP, I think, started in the early 1980s.
Right.
But it is wide ranging. It's not just ghosts. It's there's cryptids and strange phenomena and ESP and folklore and myth and all that kind of thing. So it's a whole real grab bag of it all, which is what's interesting, because you're not just focusing on one thing. And it is kind of meant to be kind of, it's made up of, there are clearly skeptics and there are clearly believers, and a lot of people in the middle, I guess. It's, the talks are very interesting. It's very much a kind of trying to understand, different phenomena in a relatively scientific way. There were talks on ghosts, which were completely skeptical, basically debunking any ghosts, really, in terms of, common things, thought of as ghosts by people without really looking into it. And,
was it just a guy in a white coat saying they're not real?
They're not real. You can all go home now.
Well, I'm just going to shut the window just 1 second, because it's noisy.
Well, okay. I'll carry on talking then to fill the air. So, there was, as I say, quite a lot of different talks. And what's really cool is they're all about half an hour long. So you get a real mix of different talks. And, one, for instance, we had Stephen Volk there, who is the guy who wrote the famous Ghostwatch program for the BBC back in the day with Michael Parkinson.
Oh, awesome. Yes.
Quite infamous. But he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about another program he wrote, which followed, which was called Afterlife. And that was on the other channel in the UK, ITV, and was called Afterlife, which, starred, Andrew Lincoln, who then went on, to do The Walking Dead. And he plays a skeptic in that. And he basically has a kind of relationship, in terms of professional relationship, with a psychic medium who he doesn't believe, but obviously it's a little bit, I guess, in a sense, a little bit British X-Files-y, although not Monster of the Week, but in terms of, you've got a believer and a skeptic kind of interacting, and there's a bigger story kind of going on around them.
So when was that then? Was that late 90s, early 2000s?
I think it was kind of mid to early 90s, 1990s, I think.
Yeah.
It's not a program I've actually, I didn't even know anything about it till Stephen kind of started talking about it. But he's a very engaging kind of chap, and listening to him talking about writing it and what he was trying to do, was, really interesting. So I'm now, hunting down a DVD of the series, have a watch, because it did sound quite interesting. But I mean, we went from that, which was, a guy who's a writer writing about the paranormal, to somebody like Professor Chris French, who talked about sleep paralysis, and talking about the kind of the history of it, the causes of it, and it was not anything really to do with paranormal, other than it's got paranormal connotations that people kind of suffer from this kind of paralysis, that kind of their body's not moving but their brain's awake and they're kind of semi-dreaming, and how that kind of comes across in myth and legend in different cultures, because obviously it happens to anyone anywhere, and so but it's interpreted somewhat differently in historically. So that was really interesting too.
Well, I can tell you the cause of it.
What's the cause?
The cause, and I think this is probably a general thing, is watching Paranormal Activity and then sleeping in your spare room.
I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
It might just be me, but
tell everyone what happened then.
So, to cut a long story short, we watched Paranormal Activity and then I slept in your spare room. but I don't know. I mean, it's not a great film. I don't really want to credit the film with triggering that episode in my life. But yeah, I was sleeping in your spare room, not at your present house, your former house. And I remember I woke up in the morning. Well, I didn't wake up. That's the thing. And I could feel like, I think because you get this feeling and then I'm guessing your brain manifests some image to go with it, some explanation to go with it, because you're half dreaming. So it felt like a weight on my chest, like I couldn't move. So it felt like someone was pinning me down or holding me down, which is a very typical experience, I think, with that phenomenon. And it was just a feeling of terror because you couldn't do anything and you felt like someone was pinning you down and you couldn't do anything. And then just sort of, I don't know if I really had images come to mind, but just a feeling of malevolence and wanting to sort of cry out to make a sound. And then eventually I kind of snapped out of it. I mean, it might have only been a few seconds, but really I think because of being locked in that state, even just a short time, and being totally powerless to do anything about it, there's a feeling of dread that it might happen again. And I think that's a and I've dreaded it. I mean, it's kind of, that feeling's gone now, but I remember at the time just hoping that I didn't experience that again, just because it was a very sort of frightening experience, albeit, not a real, well, I suppose in a sense, a real one, but,
yeah. So I mean, I likewise, I've had it happen once, but I was much younger. I was kind of a teenager, back, when I lived with my parents. And, again, it was, I think from the talk, what I understand, people either kind of tend to get it as they're falling asleep or as they're waking up, either side of the sleep process. For me, it was, I think, again, I was waking up in the morning and, again, it was, pretty much exactly like yours. I had, but it definitely felt like a physical presence hovering over me and pressing down on my chest. But it was actually more than just a chest pressure. It felt like somebody was kneeling on my chest, but they were also strangling me because I could feel kind of my neck constricting. Right. And I remember actually kind of having my mouth kind of half open and trying to shout out for help, and nothing was coming out, which for me was the really terrifying part, because of that complete helplessness that kind of came through. And again, it lasted a few seconds and then went, but it definitely felt like I didn't see a face as such, but it was like a dark kind of phantom-like thing kind of strangling me, and terrifying, really.
Yeah. So was there anything interesting that was said in the talk about sleep paralysis then? I mean,
nothing.
How it manifests differently.
Nothing particularly that comes to mind. I mean, it was more that kind of thing I've already said about he was talking about some of the different kind of cultural interpretations and historical interpretations. Obviously, it goes back to things like incubus and succubus as well. And in the Western kind of culture, it tends to be personified like the old hag kind of standing over you, which isn't quite the same in some other cultures. I forget off the top of my head, some of the other, instances, but yeah, no, it was, just a really interesting kind of, talk about the realities of it, really, in that sense of, about, trying to, good conditions for trying to avoid having that kind of thing. Because, things like, it tends to affect, in surveys, students, and people who are kind of in quite stressful periods of their life.
Right.
So I guess their mind, is kind of, as their body's falling asleep, their mind's still going because they're stressed, which might trigger that kind of thing, I guess, to some degree. So things like that were kind of interesting about, try not to be stressed before going to bed and all that kind of stuff, which, kind of makes sense anyway. But,
yeah.
The other kind of talks that interested me particularly were things like, there was, a guy called Cal Cooper, who's, I think it's Northampton University where he works, and he's got grant funding to kind of do a study on flotation tanks and ESP. So while you're lying in a sensory deprivation tank, are you able to, kind of pick up the thoughts of somebody as somebody's kind of sending thoughts, as in like remote viewing to an extent, his I'm thinking of a big red cat.
Yeah.
Can the person in the tank, are they getting any images of red cats and things like that? So, I think that's only really just started. And, but he was talking about, flotation tanks in general and how expensive they are and how long it's taken to get one. And in fact, he was talking about the mobile one they purchased, which is kind of like a big tent that you kind of put up like a frame tent and then fill with water. And so that was all kind of interesting kind of thing. I've never done a flotation tank. I always kind of was interested ever since I watched Altered States, the film.
Yeah.
Have you ever done one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I kind of guessed you had, but
Yeah. I did one in a lighthouse in Wales.
It wasn't the bath. It wasn't just having a bath.
No. It was this it wasn't there. I guess it was poor. I was going to say Airbnb, because you can't say B&B without saying Airbnb now, but it was just a B&B because it was before Airbnb. And it must have been before we had kids, because me and Lucy went on holiday to South Wales, and I remember we went to the island of Barry, so it was around there somewhere. And there was Lucy had booked us into, I think, just maybe one night in this sort of disused, well, not disused, but like old lighthouse that wasn't a lighthouse anymore. And it was a very hippie place. And anyway, so it had the flotation tank. And so if anybody doesn't know, it's basically you get in and you're floating in body temperature water that is filled with, I think, Epsom salts, enough salts to sort of make you float like you would on, I think, is it the Dead Sea?
I think so. Yeah.
So it basically makes you float. It makes you, your natural buoyancy just makes you float very easily on top of the water. And then there's some soft music playing. You get in, and you just float in the water on the surface, and then the lights dim and the music stops, and you're in total darkness, which again we rarely experience generally, I think. And time, and you have no sense of time, only your internal clock perhaps.
Yeah.
And you just lay there and nothing is happening, and it's totally silent, totally dark, totally peaceful. And then I guess after an hour, I think it was, the music starts playing again, the lights come up, and you get out. And I thought, well, that hasn't really done a lot. It was okay.
You weren't seeing things and colors and visions or hearing strange sounds, or?
I'm sad to say no.
Oh, really. I suppose the big change was when you got out and realized you had actually kind of entered into an alternate dimension, and everything.
It was,
everything was nearly the same, but not quite.
Yeah, there was like zombies running around outside, and the sky turned green.
Went back in to kind of go back again, I
guess. Yeah. No, but the next day I was driving, and I just suddenly, it sort of dawned on me how relaxed I felt.
Right.
Because I don't know, when you're driving around, and not that I suffer from like dreadful road rage, but we all do it a bit, right? That bastard cut me up and stuff. But no, it's just like I just felt more relaxed inside.
Were you at one with the world?
I was at one. Yeah.
So you mean, it sounded like you had even though you didn't see any mystical visions, but you sounded like it was a positive experience. Have you?
Yes. I think it was a deeply relaxing. I think it obviously had an effect on my nervous system, or however best to express that, which was very calming and relaxing, and that I could feel that the next day. I mean, whether it was beyond that or not, I don't know, but I could, really feel at one point was aware of the difference.
Oh, that sounds interesting. But you've never kind of thought subsequently to kind of think, well, I want to do it again, or I want to try and recapture that, or
I mean, there was a place in Oxford, and I went and did it again. On Cowley Road, of course, which is the place in Oxford. I didn't really feel a great effect from it. It's, it's not a cheap thing to do. Right. And so I haven't felt the pull to do it again. I guess, if I was having, I don't know, if I was able to see visions and see the future and see the lottery numbers, then I'd be there every week. But
marvelous. Yeah. No, I'm just because I've never done it, and obviously, I want to metamorphose into some, evolutionary step backwards, just as in altered states, because obviously that would be interesting. No, I think the whole kind of just de-stressing would be as you say, a benefit in and of itself, let alone, getting visions of red cats or other worlds. But
I mean, I think in that aspect is a bit like meditation or any other effective process that works for you that has that kind of relaxing effect.
Sure. The other two speakers I thought I'd mention very briefly, we're both kind of talking about similar subjects, and they were both really talking about folklore. There was Dr. Delith Badder, who talked about early kind of accounts of Welsh hauntings and Welsh folklore. She's been doing a load of research in terms of that sort of stuff. And it's really interesting, as you were describing some really interesting links I was picking up on, connections to Arthur Machen, because she was talking about, pyramids in Wales and things like that, which, Machen describes in at least one of his stories. So there were some interesting little links there that I thought were worth looking into. And there's Bethan Briggs Miller, who did talking about folklore in terms of the kind of supernatural landscape and how that kind of the landscape affects folklore and tales coming out for that. So and both the talks kind of had just lots and lots of little snippets and stories of strange things happening in history and written in the folkloric record. So that was just kind of interesting. Kind of talks you need to have your notebook and scribble a few notes to go and look things up later. So I have got a notebook full of various little notes I made during the thing. But
is it psychogeography? Is that the term?
Oh, I got that wrong. Yeah, I mean, well, that wasn't mentioned, but
did I just make that up? I don't know.
But yeah, it kind of also connects to kind of like the whole kind of sense of the folklore revival, horror folklore revival, with the kind of hauntology and the landscape and the kind of the.
But I can't let you get away with
and all that kind of stuff going on
with you. Something you mentioned, I didn't like jump in on that I wanted to. Pyramids in Wales. Welsh pyramids. Are there Welsh pyramids?
Well, I was thinking you would remember the Arthur Machen story.
You were hoping I would remember. I haven't read that much Machen. I read a few, but
I don't think it's the novel. I think is it that's. I'm forgetting my name. I just keep thinking of the white people, the famous one, but I don't think it's that one. It's the one where I don't think it's a physical pyramid, but I think it's like a manifestation that occurs, and the kind of the fairies or spirits or the things from the, you know, the earth kind of are dancing around, and there's some sort of sacrifice going on. I can't remember.
But are there actual physical pyramids in some way?
I don't
Not sure.
think so. The reason I'm getting it confused is because we have a Call of Cthulhu campaign that is inspired by Arthur Machen. It's not been released yet, but one of the chapters does concern a lot of these things. And in that case, I think it is a real kind of, you know, small but buried pyramid, or I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since
I feel we're going to have the dreams reality talk. This is reality.
And games in the middle, somewhere in the middle. One is a bit of both. But no, so that's why it kind of rung a bell with me. But so that, they were very interesting. So it's a good 2 days. It's pretty busy, and they have like a dinner on the Saturday night and disco and there's some wine consumed and so forth. So it's quite a social event, you know, so it's good fun. So. And
did you say that there was a psychomantium there?
Oh, there was, yes. So the current president of ASAP is CJ Roma, who some of you may know, who's also a gamer and has written, you know, various things for role-playing games, but he's actually also a parapsychologist and president of ASAP. And so CJ's got what I guess like a portable psychomantium, which basically is a device for creating ghosts. It's basically, you can do it at home if you want. You just need a completely dark space, no light. And you basically sit in front of a mirror and put a candle behind you. So that's the only illumination. And then you stare in the mirror. CJ,
I could do this in my bathroom, because in the basement, we got a bathroom and there's no windows.
Yeah. Well,
so I can shut the door to make sure there's no light coming in.
Yeah.
Mirror, candle behind me.
Candle behind you. I mean, CJ people have headphones on, and he plays, this, I don't know exactly what it is, but binaural sounds, you know, the kind of beeps and clicks that kind of open up your mental state in theory. He sort of does that as well.
Would Tangerine Dream work?
Well, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think you can do it without that, but I think that kind of helps, I think. But, and the idea being is, you know, for, you know, half an hour to an hour, normally an hour or so, you would stare at the mirror. And the idea being, you know, you kind of almost fool yourself. Obviously there's some common things that tend to happen is, you know, if you don't need to do this, but you can just stare at a mirror for a long time and your face will begin to distort.
Right. Yeah.
Which is quite unnerving the first time you see it. But so that kind of happens, but you kind of keep going. And beyond that, people kind of, report kind of, strangeness. So, you know, sometimes people might see a dark shadow or a form behind them or by them or over them. Some people report kind of feeling like someone's touched them on their back, or, you know, like a handprint kind of thing. And obviously this is all manufactured because the idea being it's a manufacturing a paranormal experience that isn't really paranormal because it's just your mind kind of playing tricks, I guess, to some degree. I mean, obviously there's probably a better scientific explanation than I can give, but yeah, you basically, you know, the whole idea was to manufacture a kind of a ghostly event, and they do seem to, you know, there's about three or four people did it each night at the convention, because obviously you've got to wait till it's really dark, because it's kind of like a gazebo he's got, so light comes in. So if it's really dark, yes, wait to do it then. But pretty much everyone that comes out reports something that's, you know, unusual. You know, they see something around them, or they see something in the mirror that's not them, or they disappear and their face completely changes into somebody else. And so it's quite a, you know, interesting kind of, you know, experiment, I guess. But that's a psychomantium.
It sounds like the start of a Call of Cthulhu scenario.
Well, yeah, I mean, we shouldn't take you too long to figure out where you could take this in the game, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that's me doing paranormal malarkey. What about You've been reading old Mr. King, haven't you?
Oh, well, I have. Yeah, actually, I've been. A friend of mine recommended Matt Sanderson recommended Desperation to me, a Stephen King novel I've not read before. Every now and again, like every couple of years, I think, you know what, I'll read a Stephen King novel, and pretty much, you know, they're all good. Well, all the ones that I've read, I've enjoyed, I think. I guess I haven't read, you know, like all of his books by any means, but I think I've read like 10 or a dozen. And Desperation, started reading it, and it's a hard one to put down. It's just it just comes off the page real easy. And I think it was written in the 90s, maybe late 90s. So mobile phones are a thing, but they don't work all that well out in the desert. So it's set just kind of on this stretch of desert road in like Nevada or Arizona or somewhere down there. And it's kind of hot, you know, deserty road. And basically there's drivers going along the road, maybe like a couple going along. I think it starts off with there's a couple, a man and a woman driving along. And then there's like an RV and there's a guy on a motorbike. And each of these people end up encountering this same cop, who road traffic cop or like town cop pulls them over and starts talking to them. But then he'll sort of start saying some odd things, and it'll perhaps befriend them at first. But then, and as we meet these people as well, King gives us their backstory. So, you know, we'll have flashbacks to their life before, or a lot of sort of coloring in, if you like, around their character. And really, for the first 200 pages, I would say that's pretty much all that happens. But the thing I like about reading King is he just does, for me, just a great job of bringing these characters to life, of sort of painting these characters and creating interesting characters. And I think for gaming, you know, it's just great sort of setting up characters. It is like, I don't know if you'd call it session zero, or just creating characters and fleshing them out and giving them background and so on. But during the game, I think, you know, it's sort of coming to the table, I suppose. And it makes you care about these characters. It makes you get invested in these characters. And even though they're not people that I feel I necessarily know people like them, you kind of get a handle pretty quickly on, oh yeah, I know, well, it's not even that I know people like that, but I can envisage people like that.
Yeah.
And they're fairly, I don't know if you'd say broad brush or what, but they just seem very relatable, the people. And they're not all necessarily likable by any means, but very relatable, I think. And so they get taken off in ones, twos, threes to this town called Desperation and locked up in the jail. And there they are locked up in the jail, and there's this mad cop, and he's killed like a couple of them. And as they've driven through town, they've seen that the town is like decimated and there's nobody else around and so on. And there they are locked up in the jail. And this cop, they can see he's like, excuse me, like degenerating, like bleeding, and his eyes are weird, and he seems to be like disintegrating almost. And every now and again, he'll say weird words, you know, tack, and he'll say shapla and stuff like this. And at some point, there's a great sentence. At some point, one of them sort of says a warning about not using the language of the dead. And that's what he's speaking, the language of the dead. Right. Don't speak the language of the dead. It's not for us.
Not for the living.
Not for the living. Yeah. I had to underline that phrase.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah. The last King I read was Revival, you know, the one that's...
Oh, yeah, I read that.
Is mythos-y kind of...
Yeah.
Although there's not really any mythos until the very, very final piece. And again, most of the book is really a kind of character study, or characters being, you know, interactions. And again, that kind of, you know, makes me think, because obviously you tells the story of this guy from being a boy and his kind of interactions and relationship with this preacher.
Yeah.
And in terms of like a backstory, in terms of in gaming, I mean, it really is good, because it kind of, as you developing your character, you kind of say, well, what's one of the earliest things you remember in your kind of session 0? And you kind of talk about this preacher and how you got to know, and hobbies and kind of things. And then you can build that up. And if you can, I guess if you know the kind of campaign you're running, or it's a pre-written one where you know who the big bad guy at the end is, trying to seed them in really early as not a bad person, but just someone they know. And you kind of have these interactions through their life until it's revealed that actually you only half know this person, even though you've known them for 30 years. It kind of had that kind of big payoff towards the end. So King is very good at kind of delving into the kind of the backstories of people in that way, isn't he?
I think so. And with a lot of King stories, this is an easy criticism to make. Oh, they all have like a famous writer in, or they all have a struggling writer, or, and again, that's in this book, Desperation, but, I don't care. And again, it's got the kid who, he is still a kid. He's I think he's 11, 12. David, he's called. And he prays to God, and apparently is getting like replies, and is almost apparently doing miracles as well. And we get in flashbacks to him also talking to a local preacher, that, when he sort of started having encounters with God, this preacher sort of took him in and started counseling him. So it's a similar relationship perhaps to what we see in Revival, I think. Yeah. So but he's taking these things and recombining them in new ways. And thing is, those ingredients I always enjoy, so I don't really mind that he reuses them. It's like in cooking or whatever, you can use the same ingredients in a different way.
Absolutely.
It's still tasty.
Absolutely.
So, but I think the main thing I'm finding with this book, some books I've read over the last few years, it's been like, I read a couple of pages and I think, I'm going to put that down now.
Right. No,
I'll read some more later. It's kind of hard work.
I don't know. You do find yourself to be a more kind of, discerning in terms of not being prepared to put up with, if the book is not kind of grabbing you or drawing you in or annoying you, which often tends to be the case with me, I'm much more ready to put it down now. Whereas back when I was younger, I would make myself read it to the end. Yeah. But now I'm kind of less. I've just been searching on the internet because I can't remember the name of it. But your story, the King story about the road and the cop kind of pulling people over, reminded me of a different novel entirely, one by Alan Dean Foster, which is called To the Vanishing Point, because it's not the same in any way, but it does have a road, and it's about this one family who are driving down this road in the middle of the desert America kind of thing, and they're pulled over, and basically they're pulled over and taken to the station, and as that happens, that slowly dawns on them, obviously not straight away, but they're actually been taken to hell. And the police turn into these kind of horrible looking things, and they're trying to, escape from hell, basically. And it's been a while since I read it, but it really rung a bell with that. And because Alan Dean Foster's usually known for doing, novel ties in of films like Alien and The Thing and so, but this is one of his own original kind of things. So,
Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
Yeah, Star Wars. That's right. The written sequel that never happened. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a topic for another time.
Probably.
Well, we should probably say a little bit about Eldritch Stories and encourage people to take a listen to because this is Eldritch Extras. This is where me and Mike are just chatting about a few things we've done recently, and we do this on the off weeks between Eldritch Stories. And Eldritch Stories is the real is what this show is all about, really.
It's the jam between the slices, the bread, the dry slices of Eldritch Extras, and then you got the juicy jam in the middle, which is the actual Eldritch Stories.
Right, that's good. So okay.
So tell us about Eldritch Stories.
So Eldritch Stories are short stories that Mike and I have written, and we read. So I read one of Mike's, Mike reads one of mine, and they're between 5 and 10 minutes long. So they're quite short episodes, just a weird tale each every 2 weeks. And so far, I think, well, if we put this episode out this week, I think we've got 2 out each. I think we got 4 out so far.
Four stories out so far.
And you can find them on, you can subscribe on iTunes, on Spotify, or whatever podcasting app you use. If you just look up Mason and Fricker's Eldritch Stories, then you should be able to find it and subscribe. I encourage you to do that. We also have a Facebook group under the same name, Mason and Fricker's Eldritch Stories. So please come along and join that. And we have a blog, again, under the same name. Well, eldritchstories.com. You'll find that. So there's a bunch of ways to find us. Please give it a listen, and also please let us know what you think, because as a creator putting stuff out, we don't get that much feedback. And I know, I'm involved with other projects like the Good Friends of Jackson Elias. We don't get that much feedback when we put out an episode. So you might think, they get lots of feedback. We don't. And is that your experience of putting things out, Mike? You don't
obviously, in terms of role-playing game books and things like that, you get the reviews, and some of those reviews are just people who've read it through and given their kind of initial kind of impression. You get some reviews a bit more in depth, like where they've actually played, a campaign or adventure, until you get a kind of much more in-depth review. And those are a mixed bag. Some people like the stuff, some people don't, and some people like some bits of it, and some people like other bits. Which is great. But what's really cool is when you only really tend to get it at conventions, where you're on a booth and somebody will come up to you and say, we've just finished the final session of, this particular campaign or scenario. And they actually give you a genuine kind of what they felt, and so you get a real kind of taste of their enjoyment, hopefully, usually they've enjoyed it. So which is really, that's really kind of cool feedback, because obviously, you can get a sense that the intention was for them to have a good time with the thing you wrote or put together. And they're telling you, yes, we did have a good time. And by the way, this is what happened. And it's kind of a surprise because they've gone off in a slight different tangent, but great, really unique to them, but really amazing and fun to hear. So I kind of get that. But as you say, in terms of the Eldritch Stories and Eldritch Extras, it would be really cool to, to be what people think of the stories, whether, that's a dud or that's a great one, or this made me think about this, or, hey, when are you putting out Zooty, units for all the homes? And whatever it may be, I don't know. But it would be really cool.
Are you going to hand make those, Mike?
I'll hand make those,
right,
with the special ingredients that nobody knows about. But whether it's leaving a review on iTunes or something like that, or, but even if you do, post it to the Facebook group. And then, because obviously that's more of an interaction, and other people can kind of pick up on it as well and comment. So any feedback is always interesting. So, if you love them, tell us. If you hate them, tell us. It's always good to hear. So,
Definitely. Yeah. And also, if there's any topics you'd like Mike and I to discuss in Eldritch Extras, also let us know about that too.
Yeah. We talk about anything, don't we? We talk about, the usual things, films we've seen, books, or places we've been to. We've done a few talks about little gaming topics and things like that. But if there's something specifically, if there's some around gaming or elements of things that you want us to kind of, give our opinions on, or what we think of, such and such a film, or can we recommend a film in the vein of such and such? They're all good stuff, and we're happy to tell you what we think. Even you may agree, you may disagree, but that's podcast for you, isn't it? So.
Sure is.
So that's cool. But Paul, is there anything else before we sign off?
No, I think that pretty much covers it, I think.
Well, wonderful. Well, as Paul has already given all the website details, I won't go through them again. But, eldritchstories.com, and the Mason and Frickers Eldritch Stories on Facebook and so forth. Just come and check us out. And we look forward to talking to you in the future. But with that said, there's only one thing left to say, Paul. And what would that be?
Keep it Eldritch.